In 1971, the second film that was both written and directed by Woody Allen was released in cinemas. That film is Bananas, given its name because it's essentially about a banana republic, but also bananas, quite frankly, characterises much of what goes on in this film, along with the characters that are in there. The film sees this rather pathetic character played by Woody Allen named Fielding Mellish, who's a product tester. He basically tests out products, acts as a guinea pig for them to see if they're good enough to go on the market. And he begins dating this woman named Nancy, who essentially wants better things. She wants somebody who has a bit more leadership about them. She's also an activist, a political activist. And in order to impress her, win her over, he goes over to this country, this fake country. It doesn't really exist, but for the sake of the film it does. He goes over there and kind of accidentally joins the rebels who are fighting against the undemocratically elected government. Well, I say elected, they weren't elected at all. As part of this rebel group, he ends up becoming president of this country, this little banana republic. And in so doing, he wins the heart back of Nancy, who thinks that he's this presidential leader and doesn't really know that it was this man that she once spurned. That is the story of this film, that is basically a sketch comedy. Much of what is good about this film is because of that aspect, but also much of what is bad about this film is also down to that aspect. This really does play like a greatest hits of a stand-up comic, maybe something that they've taken from the stage. It feels a lot like the skits that you would find on something like Saturday Night Live, just kind of meshed together and put into one film. And when they hit really well. There were countless times during this film where I laughed out loud, but I found that those times tended to be during little moments of physical comedy that came fast and were over almost before you noticed it, like kind of blink and you miss it moments of comedy. For example, there's a moment when Woody's character, when Mellish helps this guy to back up in his car, but he does so purposefully to make this guy back up into a car, makes him crash. And then there's another bit where he kind of shakes this pen and in so doing he splashes this ink on this desk clerk. So there's loads of little moments like that are just, they're on the spot, they're quite fast, and they make me laugh, kind of visual gags. But then there's other stuff that kind of feels like it's being oversold, over-egged. A scene in particular when Nancy breaks up with Woody's character, with this Fielding Mellish, it goes on a bit. It just seems to go on and on and on. Now, there's some nice play on words in that scene, but we get it. We get the joke. And once we've got the joke, Alan proceeds to kind of bash it over our heads a little bit more. And there's quite a few scenes like that throughout the film. And those scenes, when they come, well, they're a bit boring, quite frankly. That being said, like I said, there's a lot here to like. There's a lot of humour, a lot of good gags that do hit the mark. Now, Woody himself as a screen presence, this being quite early on in his film career, he doesn't really sell me as an actor. There's something a bit creepy about him as well, it must be said, and some of the gags as well kind of feed into that, especially about considering what we know about him in his later career, the whole thing with his marriage and particularly who he's married to. There's this particular scene, for example, when he's trying to get this porno mag, and it's actually quite funny when he's trying to hide it and the shop clerk kind of announces it to the whole store, but he makes this come back in effect trying to cover his tracks when he uses this gag about how he's studying a social sciences course and he's currently in the advanced child molestation phase of the course. Now that left a bad taste in my mouth. Knowing where Woody Allen's life would go, obviously later on in life, the court case with Mia Farrow and this, that and the other, yeah, that didn't really sit well with me. The editing in the film also feels very choppy in parts. It feels like there are times when maybe Alan didn't get the coverage that he wanted, so he masks it with shots from a distance where you can clearly see that the words we're hearing are not the words that are being said by the actors. There is a nice little cameo here by Sylvester Stallone. Obviously, it's not really a cameo in the sense that he wasn't big at the time and he was lending his support to this film. he wasn't famous at all when he made this, but now looking back at it, it kind of feels like this cameo, this early role by Sylvester Stallone, who was actually turned down for the role when he originally went for it by Woody himself. And he went away, he did a rejig of his costume and whatnot, and he came back and convinced Woody that he was the right man for the part. Anyway, it's funny, it's nice to see him here, but again, that scene that he appears in does go on a bit. That's another scene where I feel that the gags are being a little over-egged. While the film does predominantly play as a political satire that mostly pokes fun at these small banana republics, it also has quite a few things to say, I think, about American culture, about Western culture. There's one scene in particular when Nancy is first introduced to Mellish, and they have this conversation. He's essentially just trying to get in her pants, and she wants to talk about political activism, and Woody's character just throws all these words out there that have nothing to do with anything she says. They just not relevant at all, but they sound like complicated words, complex words, and she kind of seems to be going along with it. She just agrees like he's an intelligent man. And that seems to be saying something about the mentality of a lot of Americans who are involved in political activism at times. It feels like the smart ones are the ones who are staying at home, or at least that seems to be the picture that Woody is presenting here in this film. This does feel like the kind of film that if you go back and re-watch it, you're always going to pull something else out of it. As I say, the jokes do come fairly thick and fast, because it is like a sketch show in many ways. So I feel like there's probably a lot that I have missed, thematically speaking. Now, I've only seen a few Woody Allen films, Annie Hall and Manhattan being two of them. I think I've seen like a handful, about 5 of his films. And by all accounts, Annie Hall and Manhattan are his best works. So yeah, I liked those films. So I want to go back and I want to see some of his other work. Now, based on the strength of this, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a Woody Allen fan, but I am intrigued to see more of his stuff. Like I said, I did laugh quite a few times throughout this. So yeah, you know, this is early in his career. I'd like to see where he goes, particularly if he can hit the heights of the likes of Annie Hall and Manhattan a few times. So yeah, I'll give this film a 6 out of 10. It could be better, but it could be a heck of a lot worse. So if you're a fan of Woody Allen, please comment below and let me know where you think this ranks among his other works. And until next time, thanks for watching.